They're dying back there. It's not just Paul. No, not just Paul.
No?
What's her face is dying too.
I'm sure.
She says,
Okay.
that's all right. Call to order. Let's see. Sorry. We've already been called to order before our closed meeting. So would you all please join the board, rise and join the board in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight, we have two special recognitions. First, we're going to hear from Mr. Mike Roth about Central High's state soccer championship team, who we have here before us. In addition, we'll meet the team behind the district food pantry. So first, Mr. Roth.
Thank you, Board. On behalf of the Parkway School District, it is my honor and privilege as the Director of Athletics to introduce our 2017 state soccer champions from Parkway Central High School. This is the school's first state championship in soccer. Central last played in the finals, ironically, back in 1986, playing another Parkway school, West High. The playoff run this year started with a win over Parkway West to win their first district title in 5 years. After starting this season 0-3, the Colts concluded with a record of 21-8-1, edging Washington High School for the state title 1-0. There were several individual honors for the Colts. These include second team All-State for Will Peacock and Camden Dunn, Class 3 Offensive Player of the Year, Adam Burnett, Conference Player of the Year and Class 3 Defensive Player of the Year, Cam Baird, and the Class 3 State Coach of the Year, Coach Brian Adam. At this time, I'd like to call to the podium John Theobald, Parkway Central Athletic Director. Coach Theo.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Thanks to the board and Dr. Marty for taking the time to recognize these student athletes from Parkway Central. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention all of my parents. If the parents of the players could stand just to be recognized real quick. I should have had you bring some cowbells and some other noisemakers. At this time, I'm going to introduce each of the players. First up, Mr. Cameron Eit. Yeah. This way a second. Cameron Baird. Goose Barcelona. Nick Burke. Matthew Day. Michael Ellinger. Ryan Ellinger. Elias Nymander. Sorry, I was just informed Ryan Ellinger is not here because he's getting his Eagle Scout Award this evening as well. Charlie Rogers, Jake Tucker, Luke Voller, Adam Burnett, Christian Dimitrov, Cam Dunn, Justin Hathcock, Tyler Holthouse, Evan Cariani, Charlie Meyer, Max Alexa, Will Peacock, Ben Prywich, Blake Siegel, MJ Fritz, Jackson Kerner, Ethan Noonan, and Luke Schaefer. And then our two varsity coaches here, assistant coach Mr. Ryan Crowley, and our head coach Mr. Brian Adam. Once again, on behalf of Parkway Central, we'd like to thank the board and Dr. Marty for recognizing these student athletes. Hey, Coach Adam, how many players back next year?
We graduated 11.
That wasn't what we asked.
While we're at it, how about one more round of applause for the parents and the families? And how about one for Dr. Tim McCarthy, who supports all his teams with such grace. Dr. Gina Piccini.
Thank you. Good evening, President Feldman, Vice President Applebaum, members of the board, Dr. Marty, and Ms. Stover. It gives me great pleasure this evening to recognize our Parkway Food Pantry for their outstanding and innovative commitment to our district's mission. We know eating well contributes to a happy, healthy, and productive life. We also know that without adequate and reliable food, people suffer. In Parkway, we have some children who lack access to consistent, nutritious meals. But in order to support this basic need, we have help. We want to ensure that all students are capable, curious, confident, and caring learners. The Parkway Food Pantry was created by Dr. Charlotte E.J., Director of Pupil Personnel and Diversity, and our school district social workers. The food pantry is a fully functioning pantry located at Northeast Middle School. Each weekend, the food pantry distributes complete and nutritious meals to 890 students. And that number is growing. This year, 6,104 meals have been sent home to all of our students. The pantry receives donations from outside partners, individuals, and from district and school activities and events. 19 schools and organizations have held food and/or fund drives to help support the food pantry. This year, we have collected 10,100 food items so far. And what are we, 7 weeks? 7 weeks into it. I even heard a story earlier this week, actually last week, about an event at Central High where they held an event, and in order to enter the event, you could gain interest in the event by bringing a canned good, and those canned goods went to the food pantry. That activity was actually student-led. So not only does the food pantry support families and students with food, but it also serves as a very big service learning opportunity for our kids. Community and student volunteers help stock, fill, and deliver the orders, and our own school board held a day of service working at the food pantry. Thank you very much. So the service learning project is also very exciting because students in the 7th grade at Northeast Middle School use the food pantry. They practically run it themselves in order to do all of the daily work, filling, learning about the food pantry, and supporting. One day when I went to visit the food pantry, I had a 7th grade student take me from start to finish, how her and the 7th grade team of students stock, fill orders, process the food, decide where it goes. I mean, the children are really also contributing greatly to this. So the food pantry is a strong example of our caring nature, sense of character, and support for our families in need. Being recognized today for their work with the food pantry are, I'm going to call them up if you guys would come up when I call you and come forward. Dr. Charlotte E.J., Director of Pupil Personnel and Diversity. Our district social workers, Diane Peterson, Esmeralda Felix, Alyssa Herrera. Is Alyssa here? Alyssa Herrera. I called you. Gloria Diggs. I don't think Nancy Fezzi is here, but Nancy Fezzi. Marla Gilman. Angie Deckert. And representing Northeast Middle School, the administrator responsible for coordinating, Mike Hazelton. And our amazing 7th grade Silver Team teachers who created a curriculum for service learning around the project, and they teach that regularly. Kira Brenham, Shelley Freiberger, Jenna Lucas, and Emily Thornburg. Thank you all very much for your outstanding contribution. If you have any questions about volunteering or supporting the food pantry, please contact Dr. Charlotte E.J. Thank you.
That's good. Well, we have one more item, and Charlotte, I know, is up there probably with a picture, but is Charlotte up there? There she is. Charlotte, we're going to present this to you to be noted and hung with pride at the food pantry. We've got a couple of them, actually. So congratulations. Echoing Gina's words, we are so very proud of all of you. It took really just a wonderful collaborative effort and a real commitment. And folks, I'm just amazed at the time and effort you put in. And I know that I speak for the board. We are so proud of this effort. It really does show Parkway's caring. Certainly something we've advertised and promoted, but this really goes the extra mile. So thank you very much.
Usually at this time we take a little break so that those of you who have to go on to other activities can leave graciously. But before you leave, I wanted to point out one other accomplishment that happened in the Parkway family this week. And that is Dr. Marty's, one of his sons, was graduated from the FBI Academy. And I wanted our young students to hear that those things are possible, and those are dreams worthy of having, and we're very proud. that okay? I mean, we're going to have to come to some kind of... Okay, we're going to start again. Hello? Hello? Is there anybody here?
You're not coming through?
What? Oh, my gavel. Sorry. You know that's my favorite thing. Okay. All right. So we are at 6.0, additions, corrections, and modifications to the agenda. 6.01, addendum to agenda item 10.05, approval of personnel items. 6.02, addition of agenda item 10.28, South High Robotics team from Electronic Support Systems. 7.0, citizen statements. For the first time in a long time, we have none. 8.0, approval of agenda. May I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda for the regular meeting of the Board of Education scheduled for December 6, 2017?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. 9.0 communications, 9.01 calendar of meetings. The next regular board meeting will take place on Wednesday, January 17, 2018, beginning at 7 p.m. at Central Middle School. Any anticipated closed session will be held at 6 p.m. Board candidate filing begins at 8 a.m. on Tuesday, December 12, 2017 at Parkways Administrative Center and continues during the district's regular business hours through 5 p.m. on Tuesday, January 16, 2018. The terms of Kim Applebaum and Beth Feldman expire in April of 2018. 9.02, Board Liaison Reports. Does anyone have anything they'd like to say? Mrs. Applebaum.
And I really wish the room was full for me to say this because I'm going to play a little bit on the food pantry. I had a nice conversation with the folks with the food pantry, and I know that we're streamed, so I just want to say a few things that, first of all, I don't know if people are aware, but they distribute 7 meals in one bag to a student that carries it home. And their goal is 5,600 meals a week, and we're going to help them with that goal. Another thing is they do have lists. I really want people, and I hope people that are watching it streamed, go out onto the website and look for these lists because by district they have different things that they really like to collect. But they are also in need of hams for Christmas. And no glass items because, like I said, these are going home with the kiddos, so no glass items. And they said that if you donate individual size like cereal, not a big box of cereal, the individual ones, not a big thing of mac and cheese all the time, but just the individual servings. And they really need, I know they'll get this if the public is listening, washer and dryer and an industrial size freezer. So if anyone out there is listening, please think about donating industrial size freezer and a washer or dryer. Both. If you're going to do washer, do a dryer too. Anyway, and then we also went to the Sunrise Breakfast this morning, and that was fantastic. Great speaker. We got to hear Carmen Jacob, and she is a CEO of NextGen, and her big message was education is opportunity, and she did a great job of portraying that in her story about herself. And we also want to thank Craig Elementary Choir, directed by Sam, and West Strings and Steppin' Up, led by BJ. They did a phenomenal job. I wish I could move like those kids. That's it.
Back on November the 16th, I attended the PAMI meeting, which stands for the Parents Advocating for Multicultural Excellence in Education. These meetings are held monthly at the Instructional Services Center. I would encourage anyone interested in attending these meetings to do so. It was a wonderful experience, and one of my daughter's little friends was there with her mom, so it was fun to connect with them. But they serve dinner, childcare is available, and it is an opportunity for our multicultural families to come together. They even have a Spanish interpreter to come for families who need interpretation during the event. The main discussion that evening was about our math curriculum, and they even had us do a couple math problems together in a team, which was a lot of fun to try to get different perspectives and look at the math curriculum. So that was a very informative evening. I also had the honor of serving as an official at the West High Chili Cook-Off, which is a combination, it's a fundraiser between West High School and Pattonville High School's orchestras. And each school ended up raising almost $1,000 each at this chili fundraising event. And both orchestras performed also during the evening while people were eating their little 1 ounce, a lot of them, cups of chili. It was a lot of chili. But what a fun evening. It was on a Friday night. The high school students were there. We were all having fun. It was just a great time bringing two high schools together, school districts really together for this competition. And what an important fundraiser that we can do these to help our students to raise money for for the orchestra equipment repairs and being able to go to competitions throughout the year. So there was a very important event. We did the food pantry, as Kim mentioned. I also want to talk about, I had the pleasure of attending a football banquet. And I want to really, to Mike Roth, our sports, our athletic programs here at Parkway are just phenomenal. And we saw it here tonight with our soccer team at Central. We see it with our football teams, our baseball teams, swim teams. We've got a remarkable program here, and our coaches are doing more than just teaching kids how to play a sport. It's teamwork. It is developing character. It is helping, in the case of football, young men to learn to become good fathers and citizens in the future. They're doing so much more, and I never thought I'd be a football mom, but I am. And and I appreciate the whole concern about concussions and safety, but I am concerned that our football program could be suffering as a result of this, because we did not have very many students signed up for football this year. To even put teams together through all of our schools. And so I think that as we learn, and there was a media report where Parkway North High coach reported about the concern about concussions and how we know more today than we've ever known, and coaching is improving. They're teaching the kids how to play the game, but we can get concussions in any sport or activity, even cheerleading. They're seeing concussions. So all that to say, great athletics going on here, and I just want to give a shout out to all of our coaches for doing such a phenomenal job with our students. We had a Project Parkway meeting on November the 20th to talk about our thought exchange for the bond in 2018. It was very well attended. I also last night attended the Special School District Governing Council meeting. We approved some budget adjustments. Some revenue actually came back to the special school district through the basic foundation formula changes, some sales tax revenue that was received, and some staffing changes, some additional paraprofessionals that needed to be hired, in addition to an area coordinator position that was no longer needed in early childhood. So that position was eliminated. And then just getting to know some of the Parkway alumni people recently, attended with them, and all the wonderful things that the Alumni Association is doing to help support programs and trips. And if you ever have an opportunity to become involved in one of the Parkway Alumni Association events, which they helped to sponsor this morning at our breakfast as well, there are just some terrific people there, and I'm really pleased to get to know some more of the individuals in that association. That's it.
I'll just mention
the government relations meeting from last Friday. I'll take that. Debbie was there too. The main topics of that were discussing the policy agenda for the district, and I liked that the framing for our policy agenda is really around what we do stand for and not what we don't like. So thinking about what do we think is important in public education. We also talked about some plans for how we think about assessing students and student assessment. Attending that were several state-level reps, as well as a representative from Ann Wagner and Senator Roy Blunt's office, so good for them all to, I think, hear what we're doing in the district as well. Mary Nichols, who is a state rep, did mention that that was the first day of pre-filing for the state, and there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 bills already pre-filed by the time of that meeting, so I think we'll see a pretty busy year in terms of our state government. So obviously some things to watch in terms of education there. That's all I'll say.
Excuse me. And I'll just add, I was at a number of these events that these ladies just spoke about, and from the Alumni Association event last week and Project Parkway, and the food pantry was a unique experience, and it was great to be a part of that. I also attended a parent advocacy meeting with Dr. Marty a couple of weeks ago, where we met with a number of parents who are interested in helping be a voice for Parkway and public education. And it sounds like we've got a growing number of people that are joining that effort, and so that's great to hear. It was great to meet some of them and talk with them. I'll also mention that I spent a little bit of time. This breakfast this morning was supposed to be a community kind of networking thing. We had a networking coffee hour. And so I spent part of the time with the three young men that were working the name badge table, one each from Central, West, and South. And they're all participants of the Spark program, and they have different businesses, and we spent time talking about their businesses. And it was neat to talk about Spark with kids that are in it, but not while I was visiting Spark, because they're on, and they're not expecting, or they're expecting to talk about it. But here, I don't think they were expecting to be given their pitch, but I asked them each to give me a 60-second thing. So it was cool to talk to them and kind of be in that situation. So.
Okay. I had a fabulous Parkway Day on November 27th. I happened to be free that whole day, and I went from early in the morning till middle of the afternoon, where I got to visit with the Spark students in the bioscience program at the Danforth Plant Science Center. And what a fantastic opportunity for our students, and I see lots of room for growth in that program. And they were all so excited and engaged and doing some real-life science work in an environment with professional people doing similar work. So what a great experience for them. Then I was lucky enough to go and spend some time with the teaching and learning strand of Spark at Highcroft, and I was so impressed with how the teacher, Mrs. Ehrlich, is able to manage the comings and goings of the students that are coming from different schools with different schedules, and how they have different opportunities inside of Highcroft to tutor kids and mentor kids and work on different projects. And she didn't miss a beat. And it seemed like the kids just, when they were done with their outside of the classroom project and they came in, they just picked right up where the rest of the class was. And there was just such a flow about it. I was just so impressed. Then I got to go to Fern Ridge and spend some time with Dr. Macklin, and I haven't visited Fern in a long time, and I especially have not been there since he has been the director there. And we had a great conversation about his ideas going forward in Fern and how, there's constant improvement. I was really impressed with that. And I got to end my Parkway Day by visiting Henry Elementary and seeing the new classrooms that had been built, thanks to Parkway voter bond issue funds. And it's a growing community, and isn't it nice to be able to see the kids outside of those broken down learning cottages and in these beautiful, bright new classrooms. So I was really, really proud. The people that designed the rooms have put a lot of thought into the best learning environments for kids, and Dr. Pott was really proud to show them off to me. So all in all, just a great day in Parkway. And that is what I have to report. We are going to do 9.03. There are no board subcommittee reports tonight. 9.04, upcoming subcommittee meetings. The HR Finance Board Subcommittee meeting will be held at 4:30 on Thursday, January 11th at the Administrative Center. Details of the meeting will be posted within 24 hours of the anticipated meeting. 10.0, consent. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented in the December 6, 2017 board materials? Is there anything that needs to be pulled to action or closed? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries 5-0. 11.0, action items, there are none. 12.0, policy review, there is none. Now we get to the good part. 13.0, reports. Personalized Learning Task Force report. I'd like to call Kevin Beckner, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching, Learning, and Accountability.
Well, thank you very much, President Feldman, Vice President Applebaum, members of the board, Dr. Marty, Mrs. Stover. I'm happy to present the Personalized Learning Task Force report this evening. And I do want to start with why we're talking about personalized learning and then talk about the what of personalized learning. So this is a very exciting process that actually is about not just things we're going to do immediately in Parkway, but long-term change and some things that we want to do to better meet the needs of our students and really make sure that we're implementing our mission and vision. So to think about where personalized learning fits and why we began talking about personalized learning, we really have to talk about how we plan as a district to move forward. So we always start with our mission. We know that we want our students to be capable, curious, caring, confident learners. And along with that, we have look-fors in our mission and in our vision statements, and then we have learning principles about what we need to do to make that happen. Once we have those pieces, we also need to know, okay, so if that's the big picture, what are some of our specific goals? And we have 3 goals in Parkway, as we know, one about students, one about staff, and one about using our resources effectively. Beyond goals, we then have measurable objectives. How do we know if we're achieving those goals? What are some of the things that we will look for and monitor and measure? Once we've identified all those things, which we've done through Project Parkway 2.0, we then have to develop some strategies. And that's where personalized learning fits. So we had to figure out what are some strategies that we're going to do to achieve our measurable objectives that would in turn help us meet our goals that will be driven by our mission and vision. Here's goal 1 from Project Parkway's strategic plan, which is about our students being able to positively engage in the ever-changing world. We then engaged in the listening tour at the beginning of Project Parkway 2.0. And the listening tour is how we got information from our community, our stakeholders, our staff, and all the different groups that make up our Parkway community to figure out what do we need to do in Project Parkway 2.0 in order to meet the needs of our students and accomplish Goal 1. We spoke ultimately with over 1,100 people and went out for that listening tour a year and a half ago. And 2 questions in particular from that listening tour are relevant to the work that we're now engaged in. The first question was, what do students need to navigate an ever-changing world? So you see things on there like problem solving, like character development, technology literacy, critical thinking, analytical skills, communication skills, all kinds of things that are important to us achieving our mission and helping our students prepare for an ever-changing world. Maybe the more forward-looking question, though, was the next one, and that question was, ideally, what should learning look like in 2028? And the year 2028, because when we went out for this listening tour a year and a half ago, our current kindergartners at that time, they'll be graduates in 2028. So looking forward and thinking about, okay, when these students graduate, what do we really want to see? What does our community ask for? What do our parents ask for? What do our students ask for? What does our staff say? And you see some of the main themes that came out of that question here. And you see terms like customized, experiential, individualized, self-directed, all kinds of things that when you combine these words together, they're really about not one-size-fits-all education, but really letting our system be flexible enough to personalize to meet the needs of all of our students. So with that as the background, Dr. Lisa Meredith convened a personalized learning task force that began meeting in April of last year. So Twin strategies then, character education, personalized learning, given all of that. Personalized Learning Task Force began meeting in April of 2017 and met throughout the summer, concluding their work earlier this fall. So it did include a lot of people and a broad composition, so not just internal people, but included community partners, people who are Spark mentors, people who no longer have students in the district, but did have students in the district, parents of current students. We had some higher education representatives. We did have some of our Parkway teachers, and then we had school and district leaders. So really tried to take a broad swath of our Parkway community and bring them in and engage them around this work of personalized learning. The task of the task force, one of the challenges with personalized learning is what does it mean? Because many districts and many people in education use the term personalized learning differently, and it means different things. So one of the main tasks for this group was to develop the pillars of personalized learning for Parkway. When we say personalized learning in Parkway, what are we talking about? And identifying what those things would be. The team also was tasked with making some recommendations for how we would move forward with implementing personalized learning. Then the team also did a lot of research on specific topics, so then also to provide some considerations for when you go to implement this, here is what you should consider and think about, and some specific details that we've learned throughout that process. So as we went through that work, we began actually with envisioning. Sometimes it's better to not be an expert in an area, but to know a little bit about personalized learning and then say, okay, so here's a little bit about personalized learning. What would you make? What would you design? And that's actually where we started, was with teams meeting off-site and developing, here's what we would do. Here's what we would make. From there, we began examining model programs and looking at other schools and districts and what they're doing. We studied specific topics. We actually had some summer learning teams. For example, I was on the curriculum and assessment learning team, so what does curriculum and assessment look like in a personalized system? We had a team around teacher development. We had teams around philosophy and principles. So teams went out and studied some specific things related to personalized learning. We reviewed the existing literature, and there are as I asked Bill Bass to help me put together the literature list, it seems like everybody's already written a book on personalized learning because I think it's like 28 books long, and I think actually Mrs. Hopper came in and read most of them in part of her work with personalized learning. So we had people really become experts in looking at the literature and seeing what was out there already on personalized learning. Then we spent a lot of time actually developing Parkway's personalized learning model. Once we had spent that time to put in on the front end to make sure we had a good, solid foundation. Ultimately, what we've come up with is this model that you see here. And so I am going to highlight the 5 different pieces that when we say personalized learning in Parkway, the things that we mean are learning is arranged around mastery of competencies. In the traditional education system in America, we arrange learning around time. You need 180 days in this seat, and you need to get a satisfactory grade, and then you're finished. As we were meeting with some potential candidates before, I actually heard from Mr. Todd and Ms. Klein-Davis that they had to do 8 hours of training to be on the school board. That's time. 16 hours, 8 in person and 8 online. Am I right? Thank you. 16 hours of training to be on the school board. Well, 16 hours is a time-based model. It doesn't matter if you need 12 or you need 20, you get 16, and that's what you get, right? We really want to arrange learning around what do you need, how much time do you need, and make it based on what have you learned, not just seat time in class. Another one is making student voice and choice central to the learning process. We know that we've had initiatives that have done this in a lot of ways. Our high school students do have lots of choice. In some ways, however, many of those choices are limited, and everybody receives some of the same things. So we want to really make that central, not just a part, but really central to the learning process. We want to offer and honor authentic learning beyond the school day, the school schedule, and the school building. Honoring that idea of experiential learning, that learning doesn't just happen in our 4 walls, but learning can happen anywhere, and we want to recognize that learning and celebrate that learning so that students can pursue their own interests and students can set their own goals and pursue those things that they're passionate about. We want to promote student identification and exploration of interests. Some students don't necessarily know what they want to do. While some might be passionate and they're ready to dive in and go after whatever it is that is their area, Other students might need to find that out. So we do want to provide that opportunity for students to explore and figure out what those areas might be. And then finally, one of the ones that's dear to my heart, coming from assessment, is that we provide students with multiple authentic ways to demonstrate understanding. And we've talked in this forum before about how things like map testing and ACT are really standardized. They are one size fits all. They are the opposite of personalized. They're not personalized at all. So we want to provide students multiple authentic ways to show that they, in fact, have learned and have learned in a meaningful way. And we have many teachers already doing these kinds of things, trying to engage in project-based learning. We know that in our Spark program that was mentioned earlier, we have a lot of opportunities for students to demonstrate in real-world ways what it means to have learned what they set out to learn, and things that aren't necessarily just measured by one test. So we really want to provide those kinds of things. So when we say personalized in Parkway, this is the picture. These are the kinds of things that we want to do and the kinds of experiences that we want to provide for our students so that we can say that we're really personalizing learning for all of our children. Now, we know that this is a big lift and it's a big change, and anytime I think about change, I have this picture of a rocket taking off, and I have this picture because status quo is like gravity. It holds us down, it brings us back to Earth, and anytime that we want to make substantial change, it takes a lot of things like it takes to blast a rocket off of Earth. It takes fuel, it takes energy, it takes commitment, and it takes a sustained burn over a long period of time. If you invest that energy and that time and those resources, once that rocket gets out of the Earth's atmosphere, they turn the burners off and they coast. And it doesn't take that degree of energy anymore. But a lot of times with initiatives, you burn a lot of fuel and it's a lot easier to turn the boosters off and come back down to Earth. So we know that this is personalizing learning for all of our students is a big lift. And it is something that's going to take both short-term actions, but also really long-term actions. And we need to be committed to that sustained burn if we're going to make that happen. So as we think about this, the task force is making both short and long-term recommendations, big recommendations to help us get this off the ground and continue over the long term. Those are, on the right-hand side, we see the short term. Implement proof of concept models. That's not a term we use typically, but what we don't want people to say is, well, that can't work here. That can't work at elementary. That can't work in middle school. That can't work in high school. That can't work in math. That can't work in art. And part of how we help move the process along is we create a proof of concept and say, actually, here's how it is working, by creating smaller projects that actually show that it can model. So implement proof of concept models at each level, meaning elementary, middle, high school, intentionally built on Parkway's personalized learning model within the next 2 to 3 years. Create those smaller short-term programs so that we can actually see that these can work and help us work through any potential issues or struggles in a smaller, more contained setting. But then over the next 5 to 7 years, ensure personalized learning experiences for all of our students, early childhood through graduation, so that we can make sure that all of our kids, not just those who might choose to be in a particular program, can have learning personalized for them. That gets us back to this idea. What should learning look like in 2028? Now, we don't want to be sitting here when my youngest is currently a kindergartner. He will actually graduate in 2030, and we want to make sure that when he's walking across that stage in that year, that we haven't just repeated the same thing that you and I had, because the world is different now. And the world that they're walking into is not the same as when you and I went through school. So we want to make sure that we're honoring the work that was done to talk to our community and honoring their voices, that they do want to see individualized, experiential, customized learning that is still ensuring that our students are learning at a high level, but doing it in a way that's really personalized to meet their needs. It's our intent that this model will help do that, but we do have a heavy lift between now and then. So that was the work of the Personalized Learning Task Force, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you guys have. Yes?
I love this. I think it's great. My question is, how does this align with how teachers are being trained?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We actually had a specific work group. I mentioned that we had several of them, and one of them was teacher development. So it really is pocketed right now. When we talk to our elementary curriculum folks and our instructional coaches, what they say is, wow, this is like a lot of what we're already doing with reading and writing workshop and with math workshop, where we have mini lessons, but then students really do spend the bulk of their time working on what they need to work on, with their teacher acting as that coach and facilitator. So in that area, you would say, well, that actually aligns really well. We haven't necessarily intentionally designed it to do that, but the way teachers have been trained would really support that work. In other areas, I was a high school social studies teacher. We were not necessarily trained, even though they talked about differentiation a lot in my training as a teacher, like, okay, differentiate for kids, do different things to try to meet their needs. Ultimately, the structure of school wasn't necessarily designed to do that. So we do offer that training on differentiation. We've tried to expand that workshop model beyond just elementary English language arts and into other content areas. So we do have some places where that training is really solid, and others where it will be a heavier lift and it'll be a lot more work to get that in place.
And universities and such are coming more to this type of a model in terms of how they think.
We are not necessarily seeing that yet, but because that's part of why we had some of our university representatives there on the team. St. Louis Community College was represented, Maryville University was represented, because we want to learn from them, and we also want them to hear the directions that we're going, so that as they're having those conversations back at their university, they can know that this is something that is certainly in the conversation. And as they talk about pedagogy, some specific things that they might already be talking about are things like project-based learning, things like differentiation. Those things that might already be in place will definitely support this work moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Kevin, our laws still stipulate that our kids have to be in school 180 days.
They do.
A certain number of minutes and, you know, all those other things. So what are you doing, but you're our representative, what are we doing to bring this type of idea, this kind of model forward so that we can do this kind of instruction and education and be within the constraints that are put upon us?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Certainly some of those structures, you're right, are limitations. What we're going to be committed to doing is we are rule followers. We don't just go out and go rogue. So obviously we have to work within those systems and structures. I can tell you some of the things that Dr. Marty chaired, part of the Missouri School Improvement Plan 6, MSIP 6 work, and I was part of the academic achievement team on that, and we pushed on that group, and not just myself, but some of the other members of the group actually pushed to have some of those seat time requirements removed. I would say generally the consensus of that group was we believe in the concept of it being about learning and not time, but when it comes to the implementation, really there was a lot of districts who weren't ready to make that step and say, sure, we'll take off some of those things, but there is broad consensus in I would say in the state community that we share the same goal, that it's about learning, not seat time, that it's about achievement, not any other measure that we would use. So we're going to continue to advocate for that on that level. That being said, locally, if we can't change those things, our questions become, okay, so how do we make this as flexible as possible while still meeting those requirements? And how do we make sure that our system is flexible enough to meet the needs of students? And so we see that, just to give you some examples of ways that we already try to do that. If we see that a student, say in high school, has already mastered biology, we know that we have the opportunity to let them test not just at the end of the year, but we can give them the end of course exam earlier than that, and we do that. Say Missouri Options, Fern Ridge, we try to be flexible with when those things happen. We have seen an increase in the number of independent study courses, which we know can meet those requirements, as we've been using Fern Ridge as somewhat of a sandbox of trying new things where they're trying to use competencies. You know, what do you learn, not how long did it take for you to learn it? They're doing a lot of work around that to try to make sure that we both meet those requirements and meet the needs of students. So we'll keep working on both fronts. One is making our system as flexible as we possibly can within the structures allowed, while we continue sort of from Dr. Marty's chair, from my chair, to advocate at the state level to do different things so that we can better meet the needs of our kids.
Thank you.
Kevin, one of the discussions that we had, I've got two questions, but this is my first one, is should this become the umbrella philosophy for the entire district, that we're going to go to a personalized learning approach for all students? And in talking with some individuals throughout the community, they like the idea, but then wonder how much of a self-motivated student do we need to have to make this work? And is this going to work for all students? Or, as I saw in the report, it's going to be initially at least an opt-in for parents to want to do this for their children. Can you talk to that a little bit about how we're going to address this with what kind of a student does it take to be successful in this type of an approach?
Yeah, and so a couple things on that. One, it's our job to help them become the kinds of students who can be successful in this environment, because we know that in life outside of school, that you reach a point where you have to be independent and life itself is personalized. You know, there is, once you get beyond school, there isn't one track for everybody. So part of our job is to help build that for students. We know that not every student is going to start with the same place in that. I think that's to your point. Not every student is going to start in the same place. So, for example, when we've been looking even at virtual, which we know our virtual program, we currently offer a number of courses where students can take online learning taught by a Parkway instructor. In that environment, we know that there are some skills that students need, that they're more prepared to do that than others. So we've been providing, for example, Dr. Stanfield's been providing a rubric for parents of here's sort of the 6 criteria that to be successful in a virtual environment your student needs, so that students and parents can do a self-assessment around that and say, okay, so where is my child with that? Where might they be strong? Or might they need to grow a little bit? Again, part of our job then is if they're really not prepared for that, we have to help grow them in that, not just send them out and say, go. It's personalized. Well, part of our job is, you know what, you might need, we use the term in education, scaffolding. Some students are going to need a lot more support to do that. And we're going to have to be very tight on the process of how that happens. We also have to be age appropriate with that. We wouldn't tell my kindergartner, go do whatever you want, right? You need to scaffold that where he has more support. And then as students become more mature, as they get the skills they need, as they grow in their development at whatever age that is, we let go a little more, let go a little more, let go a little more. So we're trying to help them get those skills, develop those skills along the way. So part of my response would be, yeah, we're not just going to say, go. It is our goal, though, for it to be for all students, because we know that all students, when we talk about that term, we know each student's different, and each student has different needs, and we're going to have to meet those needs where the child is. Along that continuum, we're going to have to provide the levels of support so that all of those students have their needs met. So if a student needs more, we're going to try to give them more. We're not just going to send kids out there and say, go.
Okay. And my second question is, which I brought up before the meeting for discussion for tonight, is the 3 vision statements, and looking at those and kind of questioning whether or not those really reflect what we're doing for personalized learning, and then having conversation over that there's other vision statements that look like they might be more aptly describing what the personalized learning initiative actually is.
Yeah, and just per our conversation earlier, the intent of those vision statements is really just to show that this work is flowing directly from our mission and vision, and so we're happy to take another look at those, and there would be no objection from anybody who's done any of the work to swapping some of those out, since it really is just trying to set that context and the stage for we start with our mission, we start with our vision, we start with our learning principles, and from that, this work flows.
Thank you.
Kevin, you and I have talked, and others, and I think there's been, there's so many good things going on in Parkway, and I think maybe this is part of the question Debbie just asked you, is we're trying not to make this something that is extra, right? We're trying to make this fit the work of Project Parkway, what we've heard, and we're going to do this in a thoughtful, lengthy manner.
Yeah, we're really trying to be slow and intentional and make sure. So one of the things, we know that when we keep piling on new things, there can be initiative fatigue. We're just like, oh my gosh, another new thing, another thing we have to do. And so we are trying to be very thoughtful about connecting our initiatives. So an example, we've already mentioned a couple of them, Spark. Spark would be an example that meets many of the principles we see up here in the personalized learning model already. Increased number of classes virtually. Well, that's going to provide more flexibility to meet student needs. About a year and a half ago, we adopted Schoology as our learning management system. That's going to help allow teachers to individually assign things to students electronically in a way that they don't have a comprehensive system to do currently. So when we think about all of these things fitting together, we really do want to put them under an umbrella and say, okay, let's make sure these are all connected. Obviously, beginning personalized now, some of those things are already in place. And so we just need to reframe those and make sure people understand that. I think Debbie used the term umbrella, sort of strategy. In a lot of ways, we're trying to be a more flexible system, that this is going to be one of our long-term strategies. It's one of our 2 key strategies in this 5-year strategic plan, so that we can make sure that when things feel connected and we see, okay, we're going to start doing this because this is going to be a way to help us be more flexible and personalized learning for students. Then it doesn't feel like, now we're doing this, and this is new, and now we're doing this, and this is new. Our intent is to connect them all and have them driving towards the same goal of being flexible and personalized for all our kids.
I'm very excited about it, and I really appreciate being a part of the task force. I know that public school has come under attack recently, and I just see this, and then there were some other articles in a newspaper over the summer, several months ago, that education system hasn't changed much in a long time. It's very, classroom oriented, and the world is changing very rapidly. And I'm just very excited to see that we're kind of taking a look at how we're teaching kids, because there's so much more research has been done on how you learn, how you retain information. And in fact, the Washington University School of Medicine is revamping their curriculum right now as well. So they're going through the same process, looking at what are future doctors learning? How are they going to move forward with what's happening in medicine, in technology, in healthcare, and individualizing healthcare even. So they're seeing that they have to make changes to how they're teaching our future doctors of the world. So it's an exciting time, and I'm just very grateful that the district has taken this on. I think,
and we're grateful to you, Dr. Sorrentino, and all the members who participated, because as you know, it was a very large group, and there was a time commitment involved, and very grateful to all of our community partners, all of our parents who are all part of that work. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I appreciate all your leadership and your hard work on this. Work session, Patty Bedborough is going to come talk to us about 2018-19 preliminary budget assumptions and financial projections. And she's bringing her friend Brian with her.
Good evening. I have to say we are just totally overjoyed to be presenting budget prior to 10 p.m. In the last couple of years, I think we have hit the 10 o'clock mark, and this is very exciting to actually still be rather awake. So good evening. We have done a pretty comprehensive dive into our revenues and our expenditures, where we're at this year, and then looking into our future. And we're going to be presenting to you some of the highlights of what we have. So first I wanted to start out with our timeline, and really this is the same type of timeline that we have had in previous years. So of course presenting to you our budget assumptions tonight at the meeting. Budget memo goes out to our directors and our building principals on Friday to give our estimates as far as our per pupil estimates and their estimated enrollment for next year, so they can start building their building budgets. And then as far as for the program directors, it's not going to be an individualized budget target for each individual, but more by the SAT members for total. So within each SAT member, they will zero-based budget and work out their totals to see if they can come to the same spending level that we have in previous years. In the January board meeting, we will be presenting then these assumptions for your consideration for approval. February and March, we'll be receiving back those budgets from the building principals and from the program directors. We'll review those, and then, of course, we'll bring those to SAT for further review. So, are there other programs that need to be considered, special expenditures that are, that are needed in order to meet goals for our students for the next year. So at that point in time, we look at the expenditures in total, and sometimes revised revenue totals too, because that's a few months that have passed, and sometimes we have additional amounts on how either the assessed valuation estimates have changed or anything that's in the estimates for the state budget, as far as transportation or from the state formula as well. By April, we are compiling all the information into revenues and expenditures and then presenting that to you as our preliminary budget for that next year. Following that meeting, we take everything, build the detailed reports that go into the 130-page budget document. So it's pretty detailed, and then we bring that to you for your approval then in June. So, as you know, our largest revenue that makes up over 71% of our total revenues is our local property tax. So I'm going to walk through some very important components that make up the property tax and make an impact, any changes in these make an impact in the amount of revenue that we actually receive. So first I'm going to start with collection rate. As we know, I probably almost sound like a broken record on this. Our collection rate's heavily impacted by the amount of settlements of our taxpayers' protested tax claims. So in a perfect year that we assess a tax rate and just the assessors and the collection fees are withheld from the payment and everybody else pays at 100%, we would receive essentially right above 98%. So we know when we receive less than 98%, we either have a combination of taxpayers that haven't paid their taxes and or we have tax settlements that have happened in previous years that have impacted our revenues. So we have had some fluctuations in the last year, and including this past fiscal year, we received just below 97% on that. It was 96.41%. So while it was a little bit higher than the year prior, we're still not where we want to be on that collection rate. So in this past year, we know that we paid back settlements of over $4 million. We also know that we've worked through that recoupment process with the state auditor's office as well. So we have done our due diligence in order to recoup some of those lost revenues from the taxpayer settlements that have transpired. As we're looking forward, we're looking at a collection rate estimate of 96.75. So originally, when we looked at the budget this past summer, we were actually looking at a possibility of a 97%. As of today, we still haven't received any county revenues, so that means our payments for July, August, September, October and November have all been negative, so meaning that there's settlements on there. So we presume that this year is going to be another large settlement year. We know going forward, 2017 forward, that the state has dictated that the State Tax Commission cannot be more than 2 years behind in those settlements. So that's one of the reasons that there's potentially larger settlements in these last few months. The next component that's very important is our consumer price index. Over the last few years, we've had historically low or almost non-existent consumer price index growth. So that's the growth of the percentage of goods in the market. Why is this important for us? Based on the Hancock Amendment, when we're setting our property tax rate, our growth of our existing property, so not our new construction, but all of our property that existed in previous years, that growth is capped at the CPI, but with a max of 5%. So it hasn't been 5% in quite some time. So this current year, we were able to have the benefit of a CPI of 2.1%. Now, not all of our property experienced the 2.1% growth. We actually had a loss in property of personal property. So each of our classes of property are considered separately. Going forward, we're using a 1.9% CPI. And this is always based on the December year-to-date consumer price index. So we'll know shortly what our real consumer price index will be for next year. Next important component is our new construction. So this past year, we did have quite a bit of new construction in our school district, so that is able to be taxed and brought onto our tax rolls and recognized as new revenue. So that is part of the reason that we have a higher bump in our revenues, our property tax revenues this year as compared to last year. Now, for next year, we're estimating just based on an average of previous years. And then you'll notice in 2020 and 2021, we actually have some new construction increases in there. So in 2020, part of that increase, so we took the average amount and then put the increase on there. Part of that increase is the 50% abatement on the Edward Jones property that's at the Dorset area, so that'll come off of its Chapter 100. And then in 2021, it's estimated that the first phase of the Monsanto expansion will then be coming off of their Chapter 100 as well. So we are forecasting that out in the future as well. So all those components together, of course, lead to our assessed valuation. As you can see, we're still not at the point of total assessed valuation that we were pre-recession, so we're still getting there. So even with our really hefty amount of new construction, we're still not where we were back in 2008, 2009. So with that, everything combined, of course, that leads to our total revenues, our total operating revenues here. So as you can see, for this current year, you approved a revised budget that had $168,989,102 in property taxes based on our estimates with the CPI growth, with the new construction, with the collection rate. We're estimating that operating revenues for the property tax will increase to $172,918,728. Now also remember in the property taxes that we still have a little over $6 million in recoupment that we are able to levy within the next 2 years. Right now we're forecasting that that would be used for the capital projects fund, which is not part of the operating fund. That would be used to help grow that fund balance and offset some of those expenditures. When we look at the other revenues as we're forecasting out, we've adjusted Proposition C based on our weighted average daily attendance increases. And we also have a slight growth in the amount per pupil as we're putting that in. You'll notice that the VST revenue line, that's the tuition that we receive for the students from the voluntary transfer program, you will see that that is declining over the future years, but we are projecting that enrollment will be declining as well. County tax, the county line, that's made up of a few things, but one of the components is county stock tax. We know that in this current year, we adjusted that down to the $3,246,000 in total for county. Part of that is our revenues for the county stock tax did come in as our actual amount this year, and it is just over $200,000 less than we budgeted. So part of that impact is from the movement of Scottrade out of the St. Louis area, and that's with their merger of TD Ameritrade. Let's see, state revenues, of course, that is based on our weighted ADA and going into the formula, and then our transportation is a main number there. Federal programs, we kind of put flat over future years, not knowing exactly the impact of the federal programs with the federal budget, but we also know that we have matching expenditures. So anytime that there is change or fluctuation with that, our expenditures will also increase or decrease based on those revenue estimates. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Brian too. And this is a breakdown then of our operating revenues based on total local. So total local is 89.99%, so just at 90%. County revenues 1.37%, state 4.83%, federal 2.6%, and other 1.2%. So we are one of the districts that have one of the lowest percentage of state revenue that's received as well.
I guess the first number we start with expenses is always our enrollment, because that drives salaries, which is our single biggest expense by far. As you can tell, we are projecting a growth upwards every year, which also means, we're projecting to add teachers. So go to the next slide. And this is a graph showing it gradually increasing. And then for our staffing increases this year, we needed a 12 additional FTE, and then in future years, we are projecting an additional 3 every year, because we don't know how to play out. Some years it might be more than 3, some years it might be less than 3. And, every year we update that estimate before submitting our budget to you. So, and then the biggest component of our salary growth is our staff salary increases. The teachers are set through 2020. As you can see, roughly 9% in total for them. The nurses are through next year, and then CWA, we only know this year, and then starting in January is when the negotiations start with them. And then from there, for supporting staff and administrators, we kind of build that out after knowing what the other raises are and how that'll impact our salaries. And just because we have, roughly a 3% increase in salaries for teachers, we don't budget a 3% increase in salaries. We have roughly a 2.5% budget when we include those 3 additional FTE, and the reason for that is turnover. So, we know that salaries are going to go up 2.9 or 3%, but we're saying salaries are 2.4, 2.5 overall, and so that 0.5% in saving is about 500,000. That's roughly 20 teachers retiring, kind of at the higher end of the scale and being brought in the normal. So we definitely had more than that this year. The year before we didn't have that number, but we kind of know over time that's what we're going to average. So that's how we build our salaries. And then for support staff like CWA, support staff and administrators, we actually see more of a 1% increase year over year, so that's what we forecast for them. So we actually, when we build our salary projections, we have a different growth for our certified staff compared to our support staff, which is typically lower because there's a higher turnover among support staff in CWA. So, and then after salaries, of course, our next biggest expense is benefits, which, I think now makes up almost 20% of our budget? 22, yeah. So it's growing. It's actually, benefits some years grows faster than salaries. Fortunately, we've had 2 years where our medical plan has grown in value. This year, we're kind of looking at a slight loss or breaking even, hopefully. But that does let us know that we don't have to forecast these big increases. We're doing 2% in benefits year over year. Some of our benefit cost is fixed, like our retirement. Right now, we're expecting to stay the same year over year, how much we have to get to the state retirement items like Social Security and Medicare, they stay flat as a percent of salary. So they grow with salary. It's benefits like medical and dental and vision that grow in excess of salary. So, and then, after, between benefits and salary, that's 85% of our budget. Then we have this other part of the budget, and that's really, that's something that we can control a little more. And as we've talked before, fuel and energy are items that we've been saving money on. One way with fuel is the 10 new CNG buses. the fuel price to me is just phenomenal how much we save on those CNG compared to the diesel. And then energy, just look at the lights above our head. We're realizing savings year over year with that, which has been really good. It's helped us, allowed us to grow those salaries and be competitive with our savings in those areas. So, our continued focus on salary helps too with our insurance rate. So our mod factor is staying the same, which that's actually really good because for most entities it's growing. Whereas we can kind of have this stable insurance rate for our workers' comp and items. It's very predictable for us. Knock on wood. And then as Patty was talking about, they're talking about sets combining all the salary or having a combined spreadsheet along with that zero-based budgeting. Yeah. So, again, as she mentioned earlier, the zero-based budgeting for operating departments. I will say most of our spend now is zero-based budgeting. My department is, facilities. When you get into these technology, most of us are all zero-based now. We can tell who doesn't when they just give us a budget and they want it to all go into one account. They probably weren't. So those are the ones we're working with to get to that zero-based.
Just so everybody understands what the concept of zero-based is. So what have we been doing versus what zero-based is?
So what some of us have been doing and what you might see more typical is year to year, say you had $100 last year, you're going to budget $101 the next year, or you're going to budget $100.50, you're going to have a really small increase. With the zero-based, what you truly should do is start with zero in your budget. Look at your expenses, look at your needs and say, how much does this really cost? I've always budgeted $1,000 for my copier expenses, but truly it's an $850 expense. Well, that's what we should have in our budget is $850, not just carrying over that $1,000 year to year. What we also find is, that's a good time to cut back on subscriptions, or there might be some software we're not using, but it's just always carried on by momentum. But when you're going line by your budget, you can look at something and say, wait a minute, what am I spending $200 a year on this? And, in our budget, $200 isn't much, but $200 for every department adds up. And, that's really the savings you get. That $2 here, $1,000, $500. And we do see that really growing up, or the savings really building up. And then this is just kind of our expenditures in total. Again, salaries and benefits are our biggest part. The 18 revised, that's the budget that was approved tonight, and then we kind of build from there. So you will see our expenses for items like purchase services and supplies and materials in future years are much higher than last year actual, and that's just because of that carry forward that we put from last year, which wasn't spent, and then we built it into the budget. But we kind of offset that with that savings, our anticipated unexpended budget number of $4.5 million. We don't know which line item that's going to come in, but we just know historically that's what we see when we have this budget is $4.5 million savings. So, and we have the fund balance down at the bottom, but I'll let Patty get to that on a future slide. So, and again, here's our breakout with salaries roughly 63%, the benefits 22%. So, as a general rule of thumb, when people ask, we say 85% of our budget, salaries and benefits. And then purchase services 6.23, supplies and materials 7.8, and then debt service is a really small part, and that's just on our operating fund. So this chart doesn't include the actual debt service of our general obligation. That's the debt service for copiers actually right now.
Is that solar panels too? The lease?
No, not in this one. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, and then we get to the fund balance where everything essentially gets put together. And this is the slide that Brian created last year, but I know it's one of Dr. Marty's favorite ones that show kind of our journey and where we want to go in the future too. So that green line is our fund balance percentage. And of course, the blue bars are our revenues and the red bars are our expenditures. So we can see that in the years that our red bars were higher than our blue bars, our green line dipped very quickly. In order to recover from that, it does take some planning by everyone and some real goal-orientated spending instead of just the same spending year over year, but setting those goals and then developing budgets that are based on those goals in order to make everything work. In the budget that you just approved, we actually have a forecasted 0.38% growth in that fund balance, so a little bit higher than the 0.25%. So some of that is related to some of the recoupment that is included in the current year tax levy. We were able to reduce the amount that we will be transferring over to the capital projects fund, so that increased our ending fund balance in dollars. So then, in essence, when you divide that out, it increases then the percentage of the fund balance. So by the end of 2021-2022, based on this estimate, we would end with a 20.9% balance. At that point in time, and every year along the way, as our borrowing decreases, we'd assess, okay, when is it time to begin lowering that fund balance percentage growth? We know right now we borrowed less this year than we have in previous years, but with not receiving anything from the county, so normally we receive at least $1 or $2 million by now, without receiving anything, we have essentially, did we borrow everything?
We essentially,
yeah,
from
the TANs?
Yeah.
So we did borrow the TANs, but of the $20 million, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the full $20 million. But we're supposed to receive our first payment on Friday, so we will be hopeful that that comes along well.
We're getting a TAN payment on the same day, Friday, just in case the county didn't come through. So hopefully Monday or Tuesday we're just paying it back right away, but payroll's Friday. We had to have the money.
Right. We weren't going to take a chance. Not that we don't trust St. Louis County. They were just estimated dates, as Mr. DeVore pointed out to me. So, any questions? I'll open this up to any kind of feedback or questions.
Well, we have Mr. Chris Jacob to thank for his persistence in making us be budget conscious, be fund balance conscious.
Have a discipline.
Yes. So kudos to you for making it happen.
Yeah, and it's not just me. It truly is each and every employee and administrator in the district as well, because truly, if they didn't follow their budget and their budget guidelines, we would be in trouble as well. And especially like years like last year that we received a little bit more than $1 million less in operating revenue from our property tax than what we had forecasted, based on the amount of protests. So it truly was the amount that we have saved that really has helped this. And I can't speak highly enough about the improvements that we had made in our capital systems as far as HVAC, roofing, etc., in order to help to save even additional dollars in our energy savings.
So along those lines, we just approved some purchase of some buses, but they're regular buses?
They are diesel buses. So currently we have a fleet of 40 buses that are CNG fueled. We have a fueling station with one compressor. So currently that is essentially maxed out in the time that it takes to fuel. So until our fueling station is expanded, it'll be hard to purchase additional CNG fueled buses.
And that's what we're looking at as part of the early expenditures for 2018 bond issue?
Correct. Absolutely. Now I will, just to mention on those diesel buses that were purchased, so not only did we have a great value in the per bus price, but we also had a very good trade-in value for those buses. I don't know if you noticed, but we essentially had like a $73,000 net cost for those new buses. So the average price of the new bus is essentially
Aren't they usually 80?
Yeah, 80 to 85. Yeah. So it was, I believe, International that actually gave the best deal on that, and part of that is the buses that are being traded in are also of that same type. So they already have, I guess, maybe pre-placement of where those used buses will be going to. So,
Patty, you and I have talked a little bit. I don't want to prolong this discussion too long, but is there anything that you're watching with action in Washington, D.C. and, in terms of tax bill?
Well, absolutely. So not only with federal programs, so those are very closely watched, so that has an impact not only on our Title I, our Title II, our Title III, so, but it also has an impact on our students in early childhood, because our early childhood services for early childhood special ed are paid through federal funds. The other thing that we're really looking at in the Senate version of the bill, of the tax reform bill, it actually had a mandate that all municipal bonds were no longer going to be tax exempt. So what that means to us is ours are mostly tax exempt. I think we just actually refunded our last ones that were taxable bonds. What that would mean to us is our interest would no longer be as low as it is. It would have to go to that market rate. So right now, a municipal bond interest is desirable to some people because it's tax-free income to them. It's not federally taxable. So a lot of times that goes to a retirement plan or to a trust portfolio, et cetera, and it's income that's not federally taxed. If that portion of the Senate bill becomes part of the total tax reform, then we may have an impact on our future bond issuances, meaning we may have to lower the amount that we issue in order to have the sustained ability to pay off those bonds, with the same revenue dollars. So we're keeping a close watch on that. So far, I have not heard anything on the committee on that topic right now. The other thing that we're watching closely, of course, is the county stock tax and the financial institution tax, so both of those could be impacted with the move of Scottrade. One article you'll see and we'll read about the employees that are being let go from Scottrade, and then in another article we read about the programs that are coming to Scottrade from TD Ameritrade. So unsure of what programs are remaining and which ones are moving, so that still remains a rather fluid situation for us to pinpoint exactly what revenues will be impacted. And the other thing is, of course, not a new subject either, and that is our participation with the voluntary transfer program. We know that we truly believe most of our students that are here and participate in the program, that they will remain in Parkway schools until they graduate, but that's pretty much what we've estimated, but we don't know how quickly that turnover may transpire to it. It may be a little faster pace than what we've estimated, but we know that every day is a great day in Parkway, so why wouldn't those students want to stay here? So,
just clarifying for me, on the collection rate, how much is a 1% kind of difference in actual dollars? So if we project a 97% collection rate, we only get 96%. Like what's...
So a 1/4% is like $500,000.
Okay. Okay. And then my other question, and I think I'm going to ask this right, obviously local is the biggest revenue. How volatile are those numbers? So are they calculated on an annual basis, so therefore if there was some big drop in, or do we have mechanisms in place to be able to even that out over time?
So we set our tax rate each year. So we set that, in one of our September meetings, but we monitor that literally on a monthly basis. We forecast it out for the future years, probably at least twice a year. So we really look deep dive November and right now while we're doing this forecast, and then we consistently monitor it until we actually publish the budget. Like that's usually one of our last numbers we even settle on, and we kind of go back and forth, like, okay, I think this, well then this has come up too. And then so in a reassessment year, we have a lot more information that comes from the assessor's office versus a non-reassessment year. So we have a very early reporting of assessment in reassessment years and estimates, but we also know that those usually are not good numbers to go on. Like the first assessment is usually higher than what our actual tax rolls come out to be, because there's a lot of protests early on, and then they're settled by the Board of Equalization. So St. Louis County really does try to settle as many of those protests that they can in-house before it goes to the State Tax Commission. Because once it goes to the State Tax Commission, they kind of lose control of what the settlement could be.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You are welcome.
Call for a special meeting. There is none. 16.0. Next scheduled closed session. The next anticipated closed session will be held on January 17th, 2018 at 6 p.m. at Central Middle School. Details of the closed session will be posted within 24 hours of the anticipated meeting. At this time, the board will resume our closed session. All right? Right. Okay, thanks, everybody. Huh? Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0.